Okay, so I'm in this taxi cab, and we're driving from Krakow to Auschwitz. And the driver was this nice Polish guy, um, late 40s, early 50s, probably. Uh, really nice guy, spoke English really well, very friendly. We had like good conversation the entire way. He had actually taken me from the airport in Krakow to my hotel the previous night. And then I worked out a deal with him to take me to Auschwitz. We're talking about like a hour and a half ish to 2 hour drive, from Krakow to to the museum in Auschwitz. And like we're talking, we're just chit chatting about like our lives. This guy, he's like seems like a really wholesome guy. Like he has a 13-year-old daughter. His background career wise is like he was a an actor in children's theater, you know, and he's asking me about New York and like what it's like to live there, and I'm giving him kind of like my whole New York rant about how like oh yeah, the people are really, people are not very nice, and like everyone's like very like abrupt and like business oriented, and it's not the friendliest place to live in, not the prettiest place to live in. And kind of just for fun, I started telling him this theory that I heard, and there's a theory that like I got from the Burns New York documentary, and it's about how like since New York it was a Dutch colony, that it kind of took on this character of like Dutch trading post like very early on, and then it just stuck. And if you think about like kind of the reputation of Dutch people of like being very business oriented and being kind of abrupt, then that's kind of like the character that New York took on. So like I'm kind of I'm telling him this, and I kind of jokingly say, so maybe we should blame the Dutch that New York is such like an unfriendly place to live in. And he's one of these very like laughy sort of people, and he bursts out laughing. And like there's kind of like a distinctly like Eastern European way of like laughing, where it's like you're laughing and trying to speak, and you're trying to speak at the same time as you're trying to laugh. If you think back to like Borat, like Sacha Baron Cohen used to kind of make fun of this mannerism. um so this guy bursts out laughing, and then he goes, ah, but maybe it's not the Dutch. I think it's maybe because of the Jews. Ah ha 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 ha. Okay. So so maybe it's not maybe it's not the Dutch, for why everyone is unfriendly and business oriented, and they've made New York this kind of unfriendly place to live. Maybe it's the Jews. So I know this because the this guy later told me himself that when he said this, then my face kind of blanched. So I asked him very calmly. I say, "Oh, what makes you say that?"
You're a Jedi Knight, aren't you?
What makes you think that?
And he's still laughing, and he goes, "Because the Jews are very strange people, very strange. They're always thinking about business." Um, and then I say, "Well, you should know I'm Jewish." And then of course he's immediately shocked, and he goes, without skipping a beat, he goes, "Well, I'm not an anti-Semite. I'm not an anti-Semite." And I kind of believe him. Well, I don't know. Maybe I believe him. I don't know. But um, like at least it's a different kind of opinion about Jews when you're in a place where there aren't really any Jews. It's like, where's this coming from? It's kind of just like a weird thing to say. I don't know. So, but anyway, so he tries to be friendly about it, and like I kind of reciprocate. And partially it's because I'm not trying to have a confrontation here. This is a nice guy, and partially it's because I have this kind of like feeling of like I'm curious what he's like. If I'm kind of friendly with him, and if I reciprocate and say, "Oh no, I agree," Jews do think about business a lot, then and that's true, happens to be true. I'm curious what he's going to say. I'm curious, kind of like where this conversation is going to go. Um, and he does end up giving me his theory. He says on why he thinks anti-Semitism exists, and this is what he said. Like this is his exact quote. He says because and this is in the middle of him saying something in which he is laughing, hysterically again. He goes, "Because you guys are so fucking smart." And he talks about how like Jewish IQs and stuff like that. And he says he thinks that anti-Semitism is because of jealousy. And you know, this is something which could be like an actual good theory for why anti-Semitism exists in Poland. Going back to anti-Semitism in Poland is very much rooted in kind of a class divide that has existed in Poland, or that exists in Poland from like kind of in medieval times for like hundreds of years. So jealousy is, that's a reasonable option. It could also be just what he actually thinks. He could be, being totally honest, or it could be kind of like a nice way of him trying to wiggle out of like the awkwardness that he created by, by his blame the Jews comment. He could be like turning that into like this compliment. You know, so it could be any of those three. But well, whatever the case is, that he really does. It's not that he backpedals the comment, but like he pads it. And we talk about it, and he says that he thought that I was Mexican, and that he just some kind of Hispanic guy from America. He says he's heard there are a lot of Mexicans in the U.S. And he had never heard of a half Chinese, half Jewish person. He said that this is something which literally could not happen in a place like Poland. And he says that he'll never forget me. That's another quote. And by that, then I assume he means that he'll never forget the shock of realizing that I was Jewish after he had just made a comment that was borderline or blatantly anti-Semitic. He's never gonna forget that one. A lot of valuable lessons that both of us are learning during this conversation. Um, and side note, when he asked if I was religious, then I lifted up my hat and I showed him my kippah. Um, and he said something you're very sneaky. You're very sneaky about it. And it's like, is that like a sneaky, clever, crafty Jew comment? Like, I don't know, but either way, it ended up being like a very, very civil conversation, and for all of its awkwardness, then, went went better than it could have. Another interesting thing, he tells me this anecdote about how he once drove two religious Jews to this random village, and he said what he said was they wanted to see how do you call it tzaddik. So these were two Haredim who were probably going to daven at the grave of some Hasidic Rebbe, and it was a 2-hour ride from Krakow to this village. And he said they made me connect them to the Bluetooth, and play this rabbi talking. They made me play these lectures. Be a nice person, do this, do that. So basically, they insisted on him. They insisted on like listening to like shirim, I guess, like during the whole ride. And apparently, they kept making him turn the volume all the way up, and he had to endure it, for this 2-hour ride to this village, and like he was extremely annoyed by it, and like I totally sympathize with him. It sounds really annoying, and it sounds like total Chil Hashem. I wanted to jump in because I realized I forgot something. That this guy also told me that that these two Jews like really bargained him down on the price, and he didn't say outright that he felt like he was cheated, but like he made it clear that like they were really trying to get just like the absolute like kind of lowest price. And I didn't bargain him that much. I did bargain him though, and I apologize. Like I bargained him, to just kind of meet the price that I was getting on like Uber or something like that. but like that also, I'm sure that experience. If these guys were really, really giving him a hard time for the price, that's that probably negatively affected his opinion too. Which is unfortunate. Um, so that cannot have contributed well to his opinion, to his outlook on Jews. Um, and then after he tells me the story, then he says in this quiet voice with kind of like a twinkle in his eye, he goes, "So you want to listen to Rabbi?" Like he offers me like the cord for the stereo, and like both of us laugh, it was a joke in good nature, and like to reiterate, this guy was like really a nice guy. Like he even helped me um after the tour. Then I went to the train station and there's no one at the train station. I couldn't buy tickets, so like I had this guy's number because I had to communicate with him about when the taxi was gonna get there and everything that morning. So like I didn't know who to text, so like I didn't know like how to get help. So I just messaged this guy, messaged this taxi driver, like how do I buy tickets? What's going on? And like he totally helped me out. Like he talked me through all the steps. He sent me like websites to buy tickets online and everything. And then that ended up not working out. He told me what I should do instead. Like this is a very helpful guy. So one more thing this guy told me, which also it puts things in context. Well, yeah, so it puts things in context. I don't know how it puts things in the context. It shifts my perspective on, I guess, like what his orientation towards Jews might have been. But at the same time, I have no idea what conclusion to draw from this. So he says at one point during the drive, he turns back to me and he says, my great grandfather was killed in Auschwitz. And he tells me the story about how his great grandfather was caught with this piece of literature, this like magazine, during during the Nazi occupation of Poland. It was this magazine that was related to the uprising, and they arrested him and they took him to Auschwitz and they killed him. And this is something that was very common, particularly in Auschwitz. That there was there were a lot of prisoners there and a lot of victims there who were not Jewish at all. And so it's interesting that this is a guy who, uh, he whatever his actual feelings on Jews are, then his family is part of the story. It's part of the story of the Holocaust. It's part of the story not just of the Holocaust, but the story of Auschwitz and the atrocities committed at Auschwitz. It directly impacted his life more so than my life, I would say. It's interesting. And it reminds me of something that one of my friends told me before the trip. He was talking about how it seems like it seemed to him that like Germans had kind of undone a lot of their anti-Semitic, like I guess they had reoriented themselves away from their formerly anti-Semitic orientation, and they had really uprooted that in a lot of ways, but the Poles had not, and the Poles were just as anti-Semitic as the Germans, and like they had not changed, and still today, then that sentiment still exists in Poland. And his theory was that what prevented them from any attempt to change anything was that they saw themselves as victims. And it's kind of crazy to me that they know that they share the victimhood. They share their own victimhood with the Jews in this scenario. They were subjected to what the Jews were subjected to in a lot of ways. And that doesn't change their feelings towards the Jews. Like you would think that the common enemy and the common evil that they're facing would change their feelings of animosity towards people that this enemy also saw as an enemy, and that's not what happened. And then what I also find interesting about that is that how antithetical this idea is to Judaism. The idea that you're a victim and therefore you don't do teshuva. It's like the polar opposite for us. For us, it's something bad happens to you, and that means that you do have to do teshuva. That is a divine sign that you must do teshuva now. So anyway, after I just wanted to tell that story. It was just it was a surprising thing to hear. I'd known that Polish people, had some kind of there's an undercurrent there. I did not expect to encounter it on my first day in Poland. I did not expect to encounter it on in a car on the way to Auschwitz. If someone's saying something just so openly, especially after like I made that whole video and I had this whole experience, like with the German stance on anti-Semitism and the Holocaust and everything, and it was like this like refreshingly like this beautiful they had turned everything around and then the first day I got to Poland, it's like why this is the Jews' fault. This is the Jews' fault. I'm telling you, I'm just saying out loud, why I think this is the case? It's because of the Jews. It's just crazy.